Story number 1, Equipment Audit. I arrived at the Buckhorn station on the morning of November 14th. The drive from Laramie took 4 hours, and I spent most of it reviewing the decommissioning checklist on my laptop. The facility had been scheduled for closure since 2022, and my job was straightforward: verify the remaining equipment, document its condition, and prepare the inventory for either sale or disposal. I had done this work at 5 other sites in the region. It was administrative in nature, and I expected to be finished by the end of the week. Ellis met me at the access gate. He was the site manager, a man in his early 60s who had worked at Buckhorn for 18 years. He seemed competent enough during our initial walkthrough, but I noticed he kept checking his watch and glancing back toward the main building. When I asked if there were any outstanding issues, he mentioned that the seismic monitoring equipment in the lower level had been recording unusual patterns for the past 72 hours. He said it in a neutral way, as if reporting the weather, but his tone suggested he wanted me to take it seriously. I told him I would review the sensor logs as part of the standard audit. He nodded and handed me the facility keys. The equipment audit began on the afternoon of my arrival. I worked through the upper levels first, cataloging the computer systems, the sample preparation lab, and the administrative offices. Everything was in reasonable condition. The refrigeration units that maintained the core sample storage showed normal operation indicators. By late afternoon, I moved to sub-level 2. That was where I noticed the temperature fluctuations. The storage units were displaying readings outside their rated parameters, some showing variance of up to 8 degrees Celsius. Yet when I checked the refrigeration systems themselves, they were functioning within normal tolerances. The discrepancy was minor enough that it might have been dismissed as sensor drift, but I documented it in my field notes. At that point, I had no reason to suspect anything beyond equipment degradation. At approximately 1400 hours on the second day, I heard what sounded like rhythmic percussion coming from the sealed core vault. It was a steady, measured sound, almost like tapping. The vault occupied a separate chamber at the deepest point of sub-level 2. According to the facility records, it had been locked since 2019, when the research program was suspended. The sound continued for roughly 3 minutes, then stopped. I returned to the surface and asked Ellis about it. He was quiet for a moment, then admitted he had been hearing the sounds for 6 days. He had not reported them because the vault's security panel showed no breach, and he had assumed it was mechanical resonance from the building's foundation settling. He seemed embarrassed about the omission. I told him it was fine and that I would investigate. When I accessed the vault using my override authorization, I found all 73 core samples had been removed from their storage sleeves and arranged vertically on the floor. The arrangement was geometric. I could see that much immediately, but I could not identify the pattern. The samples were standing upright, roughly 12 to 18 inches apart, in what appeared to be concentric rings. The vault was otherwise undisturbed. The security logs showed no entry since 2019. The lock had not been forced. I took photographs and called Ellis back to the vault. He stood in the doorway for a long time without speaking. Then he said, "I didn't do that." I believed him. The seismic monitors began showing identical waveforms across all sensors on the morning of the 3rd day. This was the detail that concerned me most. The station had 12 independent seismic sensors distributed across the facility at different locations and orientations. according to Ellis. The equipment's design made it physically impossible for them to record identical waveforms. Yet the data showed perfect synchronization. The waveforms were not matching by coincidence. They were identical down to the microsecond. I spent that afternoon reviewing the sensor logs, cross-referencing the timestamps with the vault incident and the temperature fluctuations. The anomalies had begun 72 hours before my arrival. The waveform synchronization had started the morning after I found the core samples arranged. There was no clear causal relationship, but the temporal proximity was difficult to ignore. I made the decision to evacuate Ellis and initiate a facility lockdown without contacting my regional supervisor first. This was a violation of protocol. I should have reported the findings and waited for instruction. Instead, I cited potential structural instability in my brief radio report to the regional office and stated that I was evacuating the site pending geological review. The report was technically accurate, though incomplete. Ellis left without argument. I secured the facility, locked all access points, and drove back to Laramie. The site was reclassified as hazardous within 48 hours. A geological survey team was dispatched, though I was never provided with their findings. The facility was deemed unsuitable for standard decommissioning procedures. I was reassigned to administrative duties in Cheyenne for the following 8 months, ostensibly because of my expertise in site documentation, though the timing felt deliberate. The Buckhorn station was demolished by contracted crews in May of the next year. The demolition was completed in 3 weeks. All core samples were listed as destroyed in the official closure documentation. The seismic equipment was removed and cataloged as salvage. The sub-level vault was photographed during the demolition process, but I was not permitted to review those photographs. I have not been assigned to another decommissioning site since my reassignment to Cheyenne. My supervisor has not mentioned the Buckhorn incident in any of our meetings. The file was closed in June of the following year and transferred to archive status. No further investigation was initiated. The incident is now classified as resolved. Story number 2, Dosimeter check. I arrived at Clearwater Regional Oncology Clinic on the morning of November 14th to perform the annual calibration and safety certification of their linear accelerator. I had completed this assignment at the facility twice before, in 2022 and 2023. The work was routine. The machine was a Varian TrueBeam, well maintained, with no reported issues in the preliminary maintenance logs. The radiation therapist, a woman named Patricia, who had been present during my previous visits, mentioned that their treatment logs showed inconsistent dose delivery over the past 6 weeks. Several patients had reported unusual fatigue patterns that did not align with their prescribed protocols. She said this casually, as though it were a minor administrative concern. I noted it and proceeded with the standard checklist. The morning calibration sequence began at 9 o'clock. I ran the electron beam calibration first, then the photon beam. During the third run of the photon sequence, the dosimeter readings fluctuated outside acceptable variance. The measurement came back at 103% of the expected output. I recalibrated the dosimeter, cleared the machine, and ran the test again. The second reading returned to 98%. I ran it a third time. Again normal. This type of intermittent variance could indicate sensor malfunction or environmental interference, though the treatment room appeared stable. Temperature and humidity were within specification. I documented the fluctuations and continued with the phantom tissue test, which uses a calibrated dummy to simulate human tissue density and measure dose absorption at depth. At approximately 1:15 in the afternoon, I initiated the phantom test. The machine was programmed to deliver a measured dose of 250 centigrade to the calibration dummy at a depth of 10 centimeters. The dosimeter recorded the delivery. I removed the phantom and read the results. The measured dose was 292.5 centigrade, 17% higher than the programmed input. There was no corresponding error code on the machine's display. No system alert, no warning light. I ran the test again. The second measurement returned 248 centigrade within normal range. I initiated the emergency shutdown protocol and contacted my regional supervisor at 1:32. I reported the anomalous reading and the earlier fluctuations. My supervisor instructed me to complete a full diagnostic before authorizing any further patient treatments and to document everything. I spent the next hour examining the treatment room. The laser alignment guides were projecting correctly onto the positioning equipment. I measured them against the room's existing reference marks, the ones established during the original installation. The guides appeared offset by approximately 3 inches when compared to the permanent marks. I measured again. The offset was consistent. I checked the calibration of my measuring tools. They were within specification. I called Patricia back into the room and asked her to verify the reference marks. She confirmed they were the original installation marks, unchanged since 2019. I asked if there had been any recent structural work or equipment relocation. She said no. I documented the laser offset and the phantom tissue discrepancy in my field report. I tagged the machine as non-operational pending further investigation. The facility administrator, Dr. Harmon, came to see me at approximately 2 o'clock. He asked about the status of the certification. I explained that I could not certify the equipment until the anomalies were resolved. He informed me that they could not delay the afternoon treatment schedule without rescheduling 16 patients, some traveling over 2 hours from rural communities. He asked if I could certify the machine under conditional approval, with the understanding that they would contact the manufacturer immediately. I told him that I could not issue conditional approval for a radiation therapy device. The protocol does not allow for it. At 2:45, I completed my documentation, photographed the laser offset measurements, and called the manufacturer's technical support line. I was transferred to a supervisor who took my report. She said a field technician could arrive within 2 to 3 business days. Dr. Harmon called my agency the following morning to file a complaint. He stated that my refusal to certify the equipment was causing undue hardship to cancer patients, and that my findings were inconclusive. My supervisor informed me of the complaint during our afternoon call. He told me to prepare a detailed written report and to expect a review of my certification authority. The linear accelerator was returned to service 4 days later by a different technician. The manufacturer's report stated that no anomalies were found during the full diagnostic. All systems were within specification. The laser alignment guides were verified as correctly positioned. The dosimeter readings were stable across all test sequences. There was no explanation for my earlier measurements. I was reassigned to equipment installations only, with no further certification authority. My supervisor informed me that the decision was final and that I should expect no further certification assignments. I was required to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all findings from the Clearwater Regional Oncology Clinic. The agreement covered my field notes my measurements, my photographs, and any communications with the manufacturer. The incident was classified as closed on November 22nd. My file was archived with a notation of equipment malfunction, unconfirmed. The complaint filed by Dr. Harmon was expunged from the agency record. My access to the facility's maintenance logs was revoked. I have not returned to Clearwater Regional Oncology Clinic. I have not been assigned to any facility in that region since that date. My certification authority was formally terminated on December 8, 2024. The matter is no longer under my jurisdiction. Story number 3, Vehicle Reconciliation. I arrived at the Federal Motor Pool outside Albuquerque on a Tuesday morning in late March. The assignment was routine, quarterly asset verification, a task I had completed at this facility twice before without complication. The weather was clear. The facility was understaffed but operational. The fleet manager, a man named Garrett, whom I had worked with in previous quarters, met me at the gate. He mentioned that 3 vehicles scheduled for inspection had been moved to the secondary lot overnight due to a drainage issue in the main yard. This was not unusual. I acknowledged the change and proceeded with my standard checklist. I began processing vehicles in sequence, logging VIN numbers, odometer readings, maintenance flags, and fuel levels. The work was methodical. I moved through bays 1 through 11 without incident. The readings aligned with previous records. No discrepancies. Unit 7-419 was a standard Sidon, gray, approximately 8 years old. I recorded the VIN, photographed the door placard, and noted the odometer reading, 82,000 miles. I cross-referenced this figure against the previous quarter's log, which documented the same vehicle at 79,000 miles. The difference of 3,000 miles over 90 days was consistent with typical fleet usage. No immediate concern. But when I checked the maintenance history, the record showed no fuel purchases, no service entries, and no assigned operator logs for that vehicle during the entire previous quarter. The mileage increase was unexplained. I contacted the regional office. The supervisor I reached, a woman named Chen, asked me to email the discrepancy and continue the audit while they reviewed the logs. She said she would call back within the hour. I returned to the secondary lot to continue my work. Unit 7-419 was no longer in Bay 12. I checked my notes. I had photographed the vehicle in Bay 12. The timestamp on my camera was clear 9:43 in the morning. I had left the lot at 9:58 to make the call to the regional office. 10 minutes. The lot was gated. Garrett was the only person with access to the secondary lot keys during business hours. I asked him if the vehicle had been moved. He said no. I asked if anyone had entered the lot while I was in his office. He said no. I asked if he had moved it himself. He said no. I walked the lot again. The vehicle was in Bay 3, the same gray sedan, same VIN, same placard. Odometer reading 79,000 miles. I documented this in my field notes and photographed the vehicle. When I reviewed the images on my camera, the door placard appeared as a blank space in otherwise clear photographs. The VIN was not visible. The unit number was not visible. Only the surrounding vehicle and the bay number were rendered clearly. I tried my phone. Same result. Blank space where the placard should have been. I called my supervisor again. Chen did not answer. I left a message and continued the audit, excluding Unit 7-419 from my processing list as instructed in her voicemail, which I had not yet heard, but which I understood I would receive. My supervisor arrived at the facility at 2:30 in the afternoon. His name was Morrison. He was a senior auditor with 23 years of service. He reviewed my notes without comment, examined the photographs, and walked to Bay 3 to observe the vehicle directly. He stood in front of the sedan for approximately 2 minutes. Then he returned to me and instructed me to complete the asset verification excluding Unit 7-419 from all documentation. He said the vehicle would be handled by another department. He said I should not include it in my final report. I asked if there was a procedural form for exclusions of this type. He said there was not. The vehicle was removed from the facility that evening. I did not witness the removal. Garrett informed me the following morning that the unit had been collected by personnel from an office in Santa Fe. He did not have names or credentials. He said they had arrived after 6 in the evening and left by 7. The following week, I received a revised asset roster for the motor pool. Unit 7-419 did not appear on the list. The total fleet count was reduced by 1. No explanation was provided. No amendment notice was issued. I completed the remainder of my quarterly audits from the regional office in Albuquerque. I was reassigned to desk audits for the remainder of the fiscal year. I have not been assigned to field verification work since late March of that year. I have not returned to the federal motor pool outside Albuquerque. The incident was closed on April 18th and archived under file designation 7-419, which I understand has since been reclassified and is no longer accessible through standard request channels.